All right, now we're going to get into our modify tools. And before we start into that, I need to talk a little bit about object snaps. And down here in your OSnap status bar thing, snaps are AutoCAD will snap to a certain point of an object. It'll snap to an endpoint, a midpoint, a center point, these kinds of things here. You saw me in the last video there turn on my node snap. That's not one that we normally would use unless you're dealing with points. These are kind of usually the endpoint, midpoint, and center are what you would use most of the time. Quadrant and intersection, there's some other ones here that you may turn on at some point or another. So at least to start with here, turn on endpoint, midpoint, and center. At the very least, turn those on. Okay, because it helps you when you're picking things. And you'll see the little green icons pop up when we're working through a command. So let's start with the copy command. And there's a couple of different ways of doing copy. You can select an object and then just go Control-C on the keyboard and then use Control-V to paste it. Okay, and there's some options that you can use with different shortcuts like that. That can speed it up once you learn them, you use them a lot. The easiest way is just hit the copy command or type CO on your keyboard. Now you select your objects and you can select the object first and then start the copy command if you want to. But if you do it this way, if you go command first, then select, you select all your objects, and when you're done, you hit enter on the keyboard. And now you want to pick a base point. And base point is the easiest way to do this, and then you do your movement where you want to copy it to. And if you're just copying an object like this, then you could pick a quadrant, you can pick the center point and then drag it to your new location. Sometimes it may be something else in your drawing, and you would pick a base point down here and then copy it over to a similar location. Anyway, so let's just click the center point here, and then we'll drag it over. And I've got ortho mode turned on, so it's constraining the way that and you see it stays active until you escape out of it. Okay. So that's the copy command. That's pretty much the easiest way to deal with it. The mirror command, a couple of different things with it. Let's see, move is pretty simple. You just select an object and then you pick a base point, and then you just use your mouse or you type in a distance that you want to move it. Okay, so move's pretty easy. Rotate pretty easy. You select your object. Okay, and then a base point that you want to rotate it about. Okay, so I'm going to pick that corner. And because I got ortho mode on, it constrains me to 90-degree rotations. So if I turn ortho off, and so here I am at 0 degrees, and if I want to come down, specify my rotation angle, let's say 15, it went positive. So it's a little bit different than drawing with the angle. So let's do that again. RO rotate, base point, and I'm going to say negative 15 degrees, and then it rotated it to the right. Okay, so rotate, you just got to play with it a little bit. The mirror command is where we can copy something but mirror it and reverse it. And so I'm going to select this rectangle, or excuse me, triangle. Now the mirror line is where you would use to copy it across from. You can use the edge of the object and it will mirror it right on top of itself. Or you can draw another line, and then you can't just pick a line, you have to pick 2 endpoints. And then it asks you, do you want to erase the source object, yes or no? So it just depends on your situation. If I say no, and you have to say something, you have to hit either click or hit the keyboard. You can't just hit enter. So I'm going to say no, enter, and it keeps both of them. If I were to do it and say yes, it deletes the original. Okay. The offset command right here, offset or OF on the keyboard, it will offset an object whatever distance you want it to be. If you're doing a polyline, it will offset the entire polyline. If you got a polygon, it'll offset the entire polygon. Because those are one entity, if you just got lines, it just offsets that individual line segment. So let me put a couple more lines in here and I'll show you. So let's go offset. And the way this works is the easiest way is to pick your object. Well, you tell it a distance. And then you start picking your object and what direction you're going to go. If you do through, what it does, you end up drawing a line that you want it to offset through. Okay. So let's go with the distance. I want to offset this 0.25. Now I pick my circle, left click it once, and then if I go inside, it'll offset it to the inside. If I go outside, it'll offset it to the outside. Okay. Now my command stays active with that same offset distance. So if I were to come up here to these lines and pick them like so, you see it just picks the individual lines. Okay. Whereas if I had a polyline and I went to offset it, and see it's still set at 0.25, which is what I used last time. I pick the polyline and then I can go in either direction. Okay. Now then, let's look at trim and extend. And up here, you got the scissors for trim, and then you have to pull down, you can change to extend. Okay. And we'll, so let's start with the extend, okay? And the keyboard is like EX. And so what we do is we extend, it has to extend to something that would cross it normally. So you see, I can't extend these, any of these. I could extend that one over to there because it will extend over to that line. And now I can extend that one. These, they have intersections, but they don't intersect, if you will. I could extend that to there and that one to there, okay? But I could, grab one and manually drag that out. Well, the trim and the extend command work very similar in that when you're in the command, if you hold down the shift key, it will do the opposite. So I'm in the extend command, but if I hold down the shift key, I can trim. Okay. If I'm in the trim command, I can trim that back to there. I could certainly trim several things, or I could hold down the shift key and extend an object. Okay, so that's kind of how trim and extend work. There are some other things in there. Let me put a line across here. And so let's go trim. And if you look at the options down in the command line, I've got cutting edges. Okay, and so if I go T, enter, now I want to select the cutting edge object, which will be this one. And I'll go enter. And now when I go select objects to trim, everything I select will trim back to that line. And so I'm going to go with a lasso across those things, and it will trim all. I didn't select that one. It will trim them all back to there. Now this is an oversimplification of it, but that's pretty much how that kind of thing works. Okay, well let's look at arrays. And well, let's see how much time I've got on this. 10 minutes. Okay, we'll look at arrays. Let me draw a rectangle, and one of the things you need to remember about these rectangle, especially the rectangle command, is whatever you did last is what is still in there. And the last thing we did with the rectangle was the rectangle fillet. So if I go to draw a rectangle, you can see it's automatically wants to fillet that rectangle. So you have to change that when you first start the command. So I'm going to go rectangle. And pretty much the easiest way to do this is, it's fillet. So I'm going to go fillet, and I'm going to go a radius of 0. Okay, and now I can go with my my rectangle, and I'm going to make a square. So I'm going to go 2 and 2. Okay. Now to do a array, we got 3 different types of arrays. And an array is where you copy an object in either a rectangular pattern, which could be a straight line, or it could be columns and rows. A polar array is where you would copy them in a circle or an arc. And then there's a path array where you would copy them along a path of some type. Like you could draw a spline or a polyline and copy them along that pathway. So let's start with a rectangular array, and the command is right here in the modify bar up here. Or you can start typing the word array, and the pull down gives you the options there: rectangle, path, and polar. So let's go rectangular array. Now you have to select your objects, and so I'm going to select that little rectangle that I drew. Press enter. And now here we have columns. See, we can type them up here, or we can grab the handles and drag them down here. Okay, so that changed it to 3 columns. That changed it to 4 columns, okay? Same way with rows. I could come up here and say 4 rows. Okay, now the distance between, if you look at the menu thing there, it's from the left edge to the left edge. It is not the distance between the objects. It's the distance from left edge to left edge. And that would be this arrow here. Okay. And it's the same way with the rows. It's the distance between. So if I were to set that at, let's say 3.5, and set that at 2.5, so you can see how those change it. Now, levels is if we were working in a 3D environment, so it would stack them on top of each other in the Z direction, so we're not messing with that now. One other thing that you should understand. When we create an array, if I create it now, then each of these squares would be an individual entity, and I could edit or delete each one individually. If I turn on associative, see it's turned on now with blue, all of these squares in the array will be tied together, and I can't edit one of them individually. So let me turn that off and I'll show you. So I've completed it. Now when I come down here to select it, I can select an individual square. Okay. So let's run through that one more time. And I'm just going to accept the defaults, but I'm going to make it associative. Now when I go to select it, it selects the entire array. And so it really depends on what you're doing as to whether you want to keep it associative or not. And so if I edit something now, I have to go edit the source. And now I can edit that particular one. And so you change the height of that. It changed all of them. So it depends on which way you want to go with that. Okay, so that's a rectangular array. The biggest mistake people make is they think that the distance between is the distance between objects, but it's not. It's from left side to left side, or from top to top or bottom to bottom. So it's not the actual distance between. Now a polar array. So let me get me an object in here. A polar array copies something around a circle. Maybe a circle wasn't the best thing to do. Well, let's see. Let's put a polygon in there. We'll do both so you can see how this thing works. So we go with polar array, and it works easier if you've got a circle that you're going to copy them about so that you know you got your size right. So let's do the circle first. Okay, enter. And the center point of the ray. So I've got a big circle drawn, and so we'll put it there. Now, here's where I tell it the number of items I want. Okay. And these two objects here will calculate automatically. So I've got it at 6 objects. I could change that to 8 objects. Okay. Let's see, it changes the number of objects. Change the angle between them. If I don't want to go all the way around, see right now it's all the way around 360 degrees. Let's say I only wanted to go halfway around. So we'll say 180 degrees. Okay. And so it does 8 objects within 180 degrees. Okay. Here's where we can change. We can rotate items or we change the direction up and down. Now rotate items with the circle that we've just drawn, you won't be able to see anything on that. So I'm going to escape out of that, undo it. Now let's start that over again and choose the hexagon. Center point of my array is here. And you can see in this example, it copied them around, but it keeps them all oriented in the same direction. So if I were to change this to rotate items, what happened? Okay, so I turn rotate items on, and now you can see as it moves it up, it rotates it based on the angle of which it has moved it. Okay, so it really depends on what you're doing. You may want it to do that, you may not want it to do that. Okay, I think that helps us with a lot of things here. There's step-by-step instructions if you're going to go through with the book here. So we've got move, we've got rotate, scale and stretch are pretty easy to do. I'm not going to show you those. There's some trim, break, chamfer and fillet. So the fillet command here, you look at your objects down here, and you can type in a radius that you want it to be, or even if you have to set the radius. If you set it at 0, it just cuts it off at a right angle. But you tell it M for multiple, and it keeps the command active so you can do multiple fillets. So I'm going to say radius. We'll just say 0.25, and then I pick the 2 lines that I want to fillet, and it trims out the excess. Okay, chamfer works pretty much the same way, except for you got different methods to do it. Distance is where you tell it the 2 sides of your chamfer, because often they're the same distance in both directions. Sometimes they're a different distance in one direction than it is in the other direction. Sometimes you'll have a distance and an angle. Okay, so let's start with the distance option, and it's asking for the first chamfer distance. We'll tell it 0.25, and then just for giggles, we'll say 0.125. And now we select first line and second line. And you remember I told it the second chamfer distance was the smaller value. So that's the second line, so that's the way it did it. So let's undo that. And go back into my command again. And let's choose angle this time. And usually with an angle chamfer dimension, you'll have a distance on one side and then the angle of whatever the chamfer is supposed to be. Most of the time it's 45 degrees. Not always, but most of the time. So we'll tell our distance at 0.25, enter the angle 45 degrees, select first line, select second line, and there it creates the chamfer. Okay, so you really just have to kind of play with these a little bit to see how they go. Let's see, we'll explode text. Text is pretty intuitive for you to do. Multi-line text, it's a lot like a word processor. You just have to, do your kind of thing with it. That, golly, I think that will get you through a lot of the intro stuff in chapter 4. There's a lot of examples, starting around page 200 on object snaps. And then you're going to get into these little drawing exercises that we'll be doing kind of at the end there. So there you go. If you got problems or questions, send an email to me, to the instructors, or if come by the lab and see the lab tutors, and we can certainly help you out with these things.